Melanie wiped coffee foam off the counter for the third time that morning, her hands still stiff from fixing a busted laptop the night before. The bell over the cafe door jingled softly, letting in a gust of cold air and a man with a red plaid scarf tucked into a worn navy pea coat. He nodded politely at Melanie before sliding into a corner booth where sunlight from the frosted window spilled across the tabletop. She offered a tired smile in return, one that barely reached her eyes. The air inside Maple and Steam smelled of cinnamon and roasted beans, a comforting scent that Melanie usually liked, but today it only made her chest tighter. She moved on autopilot, pouring drip coffee into white ceramic mugs, checking sugar caddies, refilling napkin dispensers. The cafe had been her weekday morning gig since summer, ever since her parents decided that the college fund they'd been promising her for years was better spent on someone else. That conversation had taken place just 2 weeks earlier in the kitchen over reheated lasagna. "It's not about fairness, Melanie," her mother had said, arms crossed over a floral apron. "It's about future returns." Her father hadn't even looked up from his phone. Now, the clatter of dishes and quiet hum of jazz over the speakers couldn't drown out those words. At the front counter, Mrs. Callahan, one of the cafe's regulars, approached, squinting down at her phone. "Sweetheart," she said gently, placing the phone on the counter, "I think I pressed something, and now everything's upside down." Melanie blinked away her thoughts and stepped forward. "Let me take a look." The screen had flipped orientation, an easy fix. A few taps later, the display rotated back to normal. Mrs. Callahan smiled in delight, tucking her phone back into the pocket of her coat. "You're a lifesaver," she said. "My granddaughter just rolls her eyes when I ask. But you always explain it like I'm not a bother." Melanie shrugged with a quiet laugh. "You're not, it's just a setting." Mrs. Callahan reached into her purse and pulled out a peppermint wrapped in the shiny red foil, placing it in Melanie's hand. "For the best IT department this cafe's ever had." Later that afternoon, Melanie clocked out and walked 3 blocks to the electronics repair shop where she worked evenings. The air had turned crisper, the wind threading through her jacket sleeves. She passed storefronts dressed in early holiday garlands, twinkling lights just beginning to flicker on. The repair shop smelled like solder and plastic. Ben, the other technician, handed her a Dell laptop that had stumped him. "It boots, but then it stalls at a black screen," he said, already half distracted by his own pile of devices. Melanie sat down and pried open the back panel. Her fingers worked quickly, guided more by intuition than training. Within 20 minutes, she located the loose memory module and reseated it. When the startup chime finally played, she smiled to herself, unnoticed by anyone. By the time she got home, the house was filled with laughter and the glow of a laptop screen. Her parents sat on the couch, beaming into a Zoom call with Aubrey, her cousin, who had just started private school across the state. Aubrey's voice rang through the room. "They let me into the honors section for French. And guess what? My professor used to teach at Yale." Her mother clapped her hands together. "Aubrey, you're going to go so far. This was such a good decision." Melanie hovered by the hallway, backpack still on, waiting. No one noticed. She crept past them and into the garage. The space smelled faintly of cedar and old cardboard. It hadn't changed much since Grandma May moved out and into her assisted living apartment. Dust coated the surfaces, but her old workbench still stood against the back wall, cluttered with defunct electronics and unlabeled storage bins. Melanie exhaled and flicked on the desk lamp. The light hummed to life, casting golden pools over the scattered tools and motherboards. She slid open the drawer of an old metal filing cabinet, fingers brushing past screwdrivers, tape, wires. Then she paused. Tucked beneath a spool of copper wire was a small dented tin box. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, yellowed, creased. Her name was written on the front in Grandma's spidery cursive. "When the time is right," the letter read, "you'll know." Melanie sat still for a long time, the letter in her lap. Outside, the sun dipped below the rooftops, casting shadows across the frost-laced windows. Eventually, she stood and approached the dusty computer tower in the corner, One of Grandma's vintage builds. She ran a hand over the case and pressed the power button. To her surprise, it whirred softly, lights flickering to life, fans spinning after years of stillness. The monitor blinked on, green text appearing on the black screen. Prototype 3.1, last accessed, May Chen, 1996. Melanie stared at the blinking cursor on the dusty screen, unsure if she had just booted a dead relic or a hidden message. The garage, lit only by the amber desk lamp and the glow from the old monitor, felt suddenly alive. She leaned closer, fingertips hovering above the keyboard. A line of green code scrolled across the screen, followed by a simple prompt: Enter password. She hesitated. Grandma May had always been private about her work, brushing off questions with a smile and a, "that old thing doesn't even run." But this was deliberate. This machine was waiting for someone, maybe for her. She typed her own name, then Grandma's birthday. Neither worked. Finally, after a long pause, she entered the phrase from the letter, "when the time is right." The screen blinked. Lines of code raced downward like rain. Then the screen cleared, revealing a simple text file named vision.log. Melanie opened it. What she saw wasn't just technical, schematics, algorithms, data tables, but a full system design for something far more advanced than anything she'd studied in school. She recognized part of the architecture, a prototype quantum optimization framework, compressed, layered, and efficient beyond reason. She hadn't just booted a relic. She had stumbled into a secret archive of someone who'd been far more than just a tinkering grandmother. Outside, a breeze rattled the loose gutter by the garage door. Melanie wrapped her sweater tighter and kept reading. At school, they'd taught basic logic gates and hardware concepts, but this was like reading the future. The next day at the repair shop, Mr. Clancy was already in a mood. "The tablet's bricked," he said, slapping the device onto the counter. "Some customer tried to update firmware, and now it's a glorified cutting board." Melanie took it without a word, settling into her corner. As she dissected the device, her thoughts kept drifting back to the files. Who was Mei Chen before she became Grandma, and why had no one in the family ever known? She reprogrammed the bootloader, bypassed the corrupted partition, and 30 minutes later, the tablet restarted with its factory screen. Mr. Clancy raised his eyebrows but said nothing. "You've got a knack," he muttered. "Ever think of doing this for real?" Melanie forced a small smile. "I kind of already am." That evening at dinner, the TV blared news in the background as her father read the mail and her mother scrolled on her phone. "Your cousin's student council campaign went viral," her mom said, holding up a video. "Look at those likes." Melanie nodded without comment, pushing green beans around her plate. When Grandma May called later that night, it was unusual. She rarely phoned at dinner time. "How are your hands?" she asked gently. "I remember mine always ached in the cold." Melanie blinked. "They're okay, just a little stiff." There was a pause. "And your mind? Does it feel alive when you're working?" That made Melanie sit up straighter. "Yeah, always." Grandma hummed softly. "Then follow that feeling, even when others don't see it. Especially then." Melanie almost asked about the computer, about the files, but something in her grandmother's tone told her not yet. After the call, Melanie slipped into the garage. She returned to the console where new entries had appeared in the log since last night. One line caught her eye. Phase 2, eyes only. She hesitated, then clicked. The screen showed a simple schematic of a circuit board, unlabeled, unfamiliar. It wasn't the complexity that surprised her. It was the precision. Every line had intent. Every connection suggested something she hadn't been taught yet. She reached for her toolkit. Later, as snow began to dust the sidewalk outside, a soft knock came at the garage door. It creaked open. Grandma May stepped in slowly, bundled in her knitted coat, her eyes shining beneath the brim of a wool hat. "You've been busy," she said, nodding toward the screen. Melanie swallowed. "It's yours, isn't it?" "In a way, but it's yours now, too." Grandma stepped closer, resting a hand gently on Melanie's shoulder. "Some things I couldn't leave behind in words," she said. "I left them in patterns. She looked down at the screen. And you're the first one to see them. Melanie looked up, eyes wide. What is this really? Grandma smiled. A key, but you'll need more than logic to use it. You'll need courage. Melanie frowned. Why me? Her grandmother touched her chest lightly. Because you don't just fix things. You listen to them. Then, with a quiet breath, Grandma stepped back into the cold, leaving Melanie with the hum of the machine and a blinking cursor waiting for the next move. She opened the side panel of the console again. Hidden inside the frame was a slip of paper folded into a tight square. Carefully, she unfolded it, revealing 3 words in Grandma's handwriting. The next frontier isn't code, it's vision. The scent of roast turkey and clove spice cider wafted through the house, clinging to Melanie's clothes as she descended the stairs. The Thanksgiving dinner table gleamed with polished silverware and a centerpiece of pine cones, cinnamon sticks, and faux cranberries. Her parents moved briskly between kitchen and dining room, placing dishes with practiced efficiency. Everything looked perfect. Everything felt staged. Her cousin Aubrey arrived in a cloud of perfume and designer boots, her parents in tow with matching scarves and a box of expensive wine. Laughter erupted as they walked in, the kind reserved for reunions that mattered to someone else. Melanie lingered by the doorway, the sound of her heartbeat louder than the chatter around her. Mel, her mother called, smiling tight-lipped, can you bring out the mashed potatoes? Melanie nodded, stepping into the kitchen to retrieve the bowl. The counter was spotless, the KitchenAid mixer gleaming under recessed lights. Her hand brushed against the fridge where last year's photos had been taken down, pictures of her robotics competition, her small scholarship letter, replaced now with Aubrey's private school newsletter and honor roll certificates. At dinner, Aubrey launched into stories about her new program. Our ethics class debated the implications of AI regulation, she said. My professor used to advise at the White House. It's wild. Her father beamed. Incredible exposure. Melanie sipped her water and focused on the gravy ring forming in her plate. Her mom added, Aubrey, have you decided if you're applying early to Columbia or Stanford? Across the table, her grandmother silently buttered a roll, eyes steady on her plate. Later, while the family migrated to the living room for pie and post-meal bragging, Melanie slipped away into the garage. Her breath hung in the air as she pulled on a hoodie and sat before the old monitor. She entered the system, following a new link that had appeared overnight. Module R3, Dynamic Learning Structures. The screen blinked, revealing another blueprint, more intricate than the last. As she studied it, she reached for a notepad and began sketching patterns, tracing the lattice of neural logic and heat signatures. Footsteps echoed behind her. She turned. Grandma May stood at the door, holding 2 steaming mugs. You'll freeze in here, she said, handing Melanie one. Melanie took it gratefully, wrapping her fingers around the warmth. They love Aubrey, she said quietly. It's not jealousy, it's invisibility. Her grandmother sat beside her on the stool, not speaking for a long time. They don't see because they were never taught how to look, Grandma said finally. Some people only know how to measure things by noise and light. You work in silence. Melanie looked down at her notes. It's not just me they don't see. No, Grandma agreed, but your kind rarely wait to be seen. They build until the world can't help but notice. Melanie swallowed. Is that what you did? I built, Grandma said simply, and then I hid. Melanie turned to her. Why? Grandma's gaze held hers. Because power without understanding corrupts, and I was waiting for someone who might understand. Melanie looked at the screen again. This isn't just code, it's philosophy. Grandma smiled softly. That's why it scared people. After Grandma returned inside, Melanie stayed in the garage, surrounded by soft whirring and the hum of the heater kicking on in the house. She opened a drawer to find a thumb drive labeled Tesseract. Plugging it into the port triggered an authentication window, requesting dual credentials. One was already filled in, Mei Chen. The second line blinked. Melanie typed her name. Nothing happened. She stared for a moment. Then she typed Mel Chen. The screen accepted the entry. The system unlocked. As new files populated the screen, a folder titled Initiate Legacy opened itself. Inside was a video thumbnail. Grandma sitting at this very desk, her expression calm but serious. A knock came at the door. Her father peeked in. "Melanie, everyone's waiting for dessert." She paused the screen, eyes still fixed on the image of Grandma frozen mid-frame. "Tell them I'll be right in," she said, not turning around. Melanie sat cross-legged on the cold concrete floor, the garage light flickering softly above. The tinny hum of the old computer filled the silence as Grandma's recorded image began to move on the screen. Her face looked different than usual, more focused, her voice clear and deliberate. "If you're watching this," Grandma began, "then you found the files I hid. That means you saw what others missed. That means you're ready." Melanie leaned forward, the steam from her mug long gone. The air was still, like the moment before snowfall. "I spent most of my life building things that would never carry my name," the video continued. "In Taiwan, I was a lead engineer. Here, I was a quiet immigrant widow who made soup dumplings and spoke broken English at family parties." Grandma paused in the video and gave a faint smile. "That was the role I chose. But not because I was ashamed, because I was observing, watching which seeds would sprout without sun. You, Melanie, sprouted." Melanie didn't realize she was holding her breath until her chest ached. The words weren't just instruction. They were legacy. The video continued, now showing clips of blueprints, circuit overlays, diagrams flickering on the screen. "This prototype, Revival, is more than code. It's a framework for cooperative computation, energy efficient, scalable, adaptable. It's built on trust, not just between machines, but between minds." Melanie's fingers itched to reach for her tools, but she stayed still, absorbing every line, every intention. Grandma's voice softened. "I want this in your hands, because you think before you speak, you fix before you judge, you listen." The screen faded to black. A new folder appeared, Transfer Rights, and beneath it, a PDF, Ownership Declaration, Melanie Huang. As the file loaded, a soft knock came at the side door. "Mel?" came a voice. It was Mrs. Callahan, wrapped in her oversized green coat, holding a small foil-covered bundle. Melanie opened the door, the cold air biting her arms. "Hi, Mrs. Callahan." "I saw your light on," she said. "Thought you could use something warm." She handed over the bundle. Inside was a slice of pumpkin pie and a note written in careful script. "Some people are worth betting on." Melanie's throat tightened. "Thank you." Mrs. Callahan touched her gloved hand gently. "You've helped me so many times and never once made me feel small for asking. That matters." Melanie nodded, unable to find the words. When the door shut again, she returned to the workstation, the pie untouched. Later that afternoon, Mr. Harris, the family's longtime attorney, called. "Your grandmother asked me to meet with you privately," he said, "before the family gathering next week." Melanie's brows drew together. "What is it about?" "She's made arrangements for a transfer. Her instructions were clear. You're to be briefed alone first." Melanie scribbled down the meeting time. Her hands trembled slightly. That night, as snow began to fall outside, she opened the USB again. A new schematic flickered to life, a processor array unlike anything she'd seen in her coursework. But in the corner, in small, precise font, two names were etched: Revival 2.0, Mei Chen and Melanie Huang. She sat very still. In the soft hum of the garage, her reflection in the monitor looked older somehow, more grounded. The power flickered once, but the system held steady. She reached for a soldering tool and slid the newest prototype across the workbench, breath misting in the cold air. As she adjusted a resistor, a small warmth flickered in her chest. A message box popped up on the screen. "Prepare for handover." She turned off the monitor, her hand lingering over the keys. Then she looked at the far corner of the garage, where the old boxes of her childhood robotics kits still sat, half forgotten. A line from the video echoed in her mind. "You're not just the next step, you're the bridge." Grandma's voice returned, soft but unmistakable, as if she were standing beside her again. "Week from now, I won't be here, but you will, and that's what matters." Snow blanketed Stratford in a quiet hush that morning, muting the crunch of tires and softening the hard lines of fences and rooftops. Melanie stood outside Mr. Harris's law office, her breath forming small clouds as she adjusted the strap of her worn canvas bag. She wasn't sure what to expect, only that Grandma May had been deliberate, always. Inside, the warmth hit her cheeks like a wave. Mr. Harris, a man in his early 70s with a voice like flannel and fingers that always trembled slightly when he poured tea, greeted her with a gentle smile. "Melanie," he said, standing to shake her hand. "Thank you for coming. Your grandmother was very particular about the timing." She nodded, still unsure if she was here for legal jargon or something deeper. The office smelled faintly of old books and wood polish. Framed diplomas lined the wall behind him, but it was the old photo on his desk, May and him, maybe from the 80s, that caught her eye. Mr. Harris gestured to a leather chair and tapped a file folder resting on the desk. "Before the others arrive next week for the formal reading, your grandmother left instructions to share this with you first, alone." He opened the folder, revealing a slim USB drive and a single-page letter in Grandma's handwriting. "I've read through it, of course," he said gently. "You have my word, nothing in here was accidental." Melanie reached for the letter with both hands. "Dearest Melanie, if you're reading this, I'm likely off testing the laws of thermodynamics, somewhere beyond the veil. Don't be too sad. You and I both know time bends in curious ways when you're working on something you love." The letter went on, describing how Grandma had kept her achievement secret, not out of shame, but to observe, to wait. She had watched Melanie grow, not into someone with awards or accolades, but into someone who offered quiet kindness and asked thoughtful questions. You didn't rush to open the machine. You waited. You listened. That was the final test. Mr. Harris slid a small remote across the desk. "She also left a video," he said. "We'll play it together now." The monitor on the bookshelf flickered to life. Grandma May sat in the old garage chair, bundled in her red scarf, her voice calm and firm. "To the family," she began. "I leave this message as both farewell and clarification. There are truths you never knew, not because I didn't trust you, but because I wanted to see your choices without the shadow of inheritance." Her image looked directly into the lens. "I was not just the grandmother who made dumplings. I was the CTO of Maytech Labs, an earlier lead engineer at the Taipei Quantum Initiative. The systems you now see as experimental, I helped design their bones." Gas filled the room. Melanie blinked, realizing Mr. Harris had put the video on speaker for the office staff as well. "But this isn't about what I did," the video continued. "It's about who I see as the future." She paused. "To my granddaughter Aubrey, I leave a $100,000 educational trust, contingent upon maintaining a B+ average in verified STEM coursework." Melanie's eyebrows lifted. That alone would have sent shockwaves through the family. "To my daughter and son-in-law," May continued, "I leave the home, though they must not sell it until Melanie finishes her academic pursuits, out of respect for what was taken." Mr. Harris's eyebrows rose subtly, but he said nothing. The room stilled as Grandma leaned forward in the video. "And to Melanie, who soldered circuits with burned fingers and never once complained, I leave the following: all remaining technology patents, active and pending, all project notes, prototypes, and development rights, the Revival platform, and the full voting share of Maytech's silent stake in Synapse Quantum Labs." Melanie's mouth went dry. Mr. Harris cleared his throat. "I will oversee the transition personally," he said. "Your grandmother was adamant." The video faded, but Grandma's voice lingered in the silence like a tuning fork in the bones. As Mr. Harris busied himself gathering documents, Melanie sat still, fingers curled lightly around the arms of the chair. She hadn't asked for this, never lobbied, never hinted. But somehow, Grandma had seen what no one else did. That evening, she returned home to find her parents sitting stiffly on the couch. Aubrey stood awkwardly by the fireplace, her mouth half open, as though trying to form the right kind of smile. "You knew?" her mother asked, voice brittle. "No," Melanie replied, "not until today." Aubrey stepped forward. "Look, Mel, I didn't know what she was planning, but maybe we could work together on something." Melanie studied her cousin for a long moment. "Maybe," she said quietly, "but not because I owe you anything." She turned toward the hallway, her steps slow, her thoughts loud. When she reached the garage, the light clicked on automatically, illuminating the workbench where Revival 2.0 now blinked steadily. Her phone buzzed. Incoming call. Stanford admissions office. She stared at the screen. Let it ring once, twice, then answered. Snow had melted into slush by the time Melanie stepped off the city bus and onto the cracked pavement outside her old community college. The wind carried the scent of damp earth and something hopeful, like the world was waiting for something new to bloom, even in winter. She walked past familiar benches, the vending machine that never worked, and the poster board in the student center, now crowded with flyers for tutoring help and part-time jobs. But she wasn't a student here anymore, not technically, not since the call from Stanford. Inside her coat pocket was a letter, creased and reread so many times it had become soft at the folds. Full scholarship, early acceptance, a handwritten note from the admissions dean. We were deeply moved by your letter and your enclosed designs. Dr. Mei Chen's name carries weight, but your voice, your clarity, that's what earned this spot. She stopped by the workshop classroom, now locked for winter break. Through the glass, she could see the rows of soldering, irons, and circuit kits, the place where she once taught herself how to reverse engineer an old motherboard because no one else offered to help. The memory ached and comforted her all at once. Back in Stratford, Grandma May's funeral had been quiet, dignified. No slideshow of her life, no elaborate eulogies. Just a soft melody playing in the chapel and a table with a photograph. Grandma, seated at her bench, a single silver wire curled between her fingers. Melanie had spoken, though, just one line. She never told me who to be. She just made sure I had the tools. Afterward, people had come up to her, neighbors she barely knew, old friends of Grandma's from the community center. Even Mrs. Callahan, who pressed a hand to her shoulder and whispered, "You're what she waited for." Now, standing at the edge of campus, Melanie pulled out her phone. A new message blinked on screen from a number labeled Lily, STEM Club. "Is it true? You're starting a scholarship?" Melanie smiled faintly and typed back, "Yes, for kids like us, who don't always get seen right away." The next day, she sat at her workbench now. The garage had been cleaned, reorganized, and expanded. Her parents had begun to understand slowly that technical didn't mean small, and that silence didn't mean insignificance. Her father no longer asked what she was tinkering with. He asked if he could bring her tea. Her mother left cut fruit beside her projects. Small gestures, but they landed. Revival 2.0 was now under development with Synapse Labs, and Melanie worked remotely with a team of engineers from across the globe. Her name appeared on early white papers beside Mei Chen's. Investors called daily. She answered when she wanted to, but she still kept office hours in the garage. That afternoon, a knock came. A girl, maybe 12, stood on the steps, backpack slipping off one shoulder, her cheeks red from the cold. "My science teacher said you fix computers," she said. Melanie smiled. "Sometimes." The girl hesitated. "My mom's laptop. It won't turn on. She says we can't afford to replace it." Melanie stepped aside. "Bring it over." As the girl unpacked the ancient Dell, her eyes scanned the walls, lined with blueprints, sketches, soldered prototypes. She looked up at Melanie. "Did you build all this?" "Some," Melanie replied. "Some of it came before me, but it's mine now." The girl opened the backpack further and pulled out a spiral notebook, full of drawings, circuits, robots, strange ideas. "I try stuff," she said shyly. "It doesn't always work." Melanie grinned. "That's how you know it's working." The heater kicked on. Outside, wind pushed leaves across the driveway. Inside, the garage hummed to life. Screwdrivers, wires, possibility. As Melanie guided the girl through a basic diagnostic, she noticed something in the younger girl's eyes. Wonder, focus, fire, just like her own once. Melanie pulled an old circuit board from the drawer and handed it over. "Want to learn how computers think?" The girl nodded eagerly. "Well then," Melanie said, smiling, "let me tell you a story about my grandmother. Some of the most powerful legacies are passed not through grand speeches or shiny medals, but through quiet moments, like a girl fixing an old computer in a cold garage. Melanie didn't win the world's attention by shouting. She earned it by listening, building, and showing kindness without expecting anything in return. In a world that often celebrates appearances, she reminded us that character runs deeper than credentials. Like a soft light behind a frosted window, a simple act of quiet goodness can illuminate the darkest corners of life. And perhaps, if we're paying attention, we'll recognize those small sparks and choose to pass them on,